The quantum particles danced across James Harrison's holographic display, their movements precise and predictable. If only life could be as orderly as quantum mechanics, he thought, adjusting the parameters of his latest experiment at the Global Physics Institute. The familiar hum of laboratory equipment provided little comfort today, not when the world outside had become stranger than any scientific theory he'd ever studied. The lab's window offered a view of New Singapore's transformed skyline, where traditional architecture now merged with impossible structures that seemed to defy gravity. Crystalline towers stretched toward the purple-tinted sky, a permanent reminder of Earth's new place in the galactic community. Ships of various alien designs wove between buildings, their propulsion systems leaving traces of shimmering light in their wake. James ran his fingers through his dark hair, trying to focus on the quantum entanglement readings before him. But the notification hovering in his peripheral vision wouldn't go away, a persistent reminder of the message he'd been avoiding all morning. With a resigned sigh, he finally gestured to open it. The holographic seal of the Global Integration Council materialized, its blue light casting strange shadows across his workspace. "Dear Dr. James Harrison," the message began, its formal tone doing nothing to soften the impact of what followed. "In accordance with the Interstellar Marriage Act of 2157, you have been selected for participation in the Galactic Unity program." His stomach tightened. He'd known this was coming, everyone had known since the law passed 6 months ago. After Earth's acceptance into the Galactic Federation, the announcement of mandatory marriages between humans and alien species had sparked protests worldwide. The Federation insisted it was necessary for genetic diversity and cultural integration, but to James, it felt like a poorly disguised form of control. "Your genetic profile and psychological evaluation have been matched with 3 compatible partners from participating civilizations," the message continued. James felt the blood drain from his face as 3 holographic profiles materialized before him. The first showed a being of pure energy contained within a humanoid form, its thoughts apparently capable of touching minds across vast distances. "Nixus of the Asturian Empire," the profile read, "a master of telepathic sciences." The second profile displayed a creature that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states, its skin iridescent like the surface of a soap bubble. Talia of Oceanus Prime, a warrior scholar of the deep. The third was a being whose very presence seemed to lower the temperature in the room, its form crystalline and elegant. Kira of the Frost Nebula, strategic advisor to the Cryogenic Council. James closed his eyes, trying to process the reality of his situation. He'd spent his life pursuing the fundamental truths of the universe, reducing complexity to elegant equations. But there was no equation for this, no formula to calculate the impact of having 3 alien wives thrust upon him by interstellar law. The lab door slid open with a soft hiss, and Dr. Patel, his research partner, entered. One look at James's face told her everything she needed to know. "You got the notice, didn't you?" she asked, her voice gentle with understanding. "3 of them, Priya," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're sending me 3 wives." Priya placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "When?" "Nixus arrives in 3 days. The others will follow weekly." He gestured at the holographic profiles still floating in the air. "How am I supposed to manage this? I can barely maintain a conversation at academic conferences, let alone navigate relationships with 3 alien beings." "Maybe that's exactly why they chose you," Priya suggested, studying the profiles with genuine curiosity. "You're analytical, adaptable, and more importantly, you understand that different doesn't mean wrong. Those are rare qualities, James." He appreciated her attempt at reassurance, but the weight of what was coming pressed heavily on his chest. His apartment, designed for one introverted physicist, would soon house 4 beings from entirely different worlds. His ordered, predictable life was about to become a study in chaos theory. As the day wore on, James tried to lose himself in his work, but his mind kept drifting to the impending changes. He thought about the modifications he'd need to make to his home, environmental controls for each of his wives' unique physiological needs, communication systems capable of translating multiple alien languages, and whatever other accommodations he hadn't even considered yet. When evening came, he walked home through streets that buzzed with a mix of human and alien life. Street vendors sold Earth delicacies alongside crystalline fruits from distant worlds. A group of luminescent beings floated past, their conversation a symphony of light patterns he couldn't begin to understand. In his apartment, James stood at his window, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the sky in shades of purple and green. The city below him hummed with life, a testament to humanity's ability to adapt to the impossible. Perhaps that's what he needed to do now: adapt, evolve, become something more than what he was. He pulled up the profiles of his future wives again, studying them more carefully this time. Each one represented not just a different species, but a different way of seeing the universe. Nixus's telepathic abilities could revolutionize his understanding of quantum observation. Talia's fluid nature might offer insights into state changes he'd never considered. And Kira's mastery of thermal energy could open new avenues in his research. As he prepared for bed that night, James realized that while his life was about to become exponentially more complicated, it might also become exponentially more fascinating. He was, after all, a scientist. And what was this if not the most extraordinary experiment of his life? The arrival of an Asterian ship was unlike anything James had ever witnessed. It didn't so much fly as phase into existence, appearing in the sky above New Singapore like a tear in reality itself. The vessel was organic in design, its surface rippling with patterns of light that seemed to respond to the thoughts of those watching below. James stood on his apartment's landing pad, his heart racing as the ship descended. He'd spent the last 3 days preparing for this moment, installing specialized equipment to accommodate a being of pure energy, reading everything he could find about Asterian culture, and trying to wrap his mind around the concept of sharing his thoughts with another being. The ship's hull dissolved like morning mist, and there she was, Nixus of the Asterian Empire. Her form was both there and not there, a humanoid shape composed of swirling energy in shades of violet and gold. Where a human would have eyes, she had 2 points of intense light that seemed to pierce straight through to James's soul. "Your thoughts are orderly," her voice resonated directly in his mind, a sensation that made him shiver. "Like the equations you love so much." James swallowed hard, unsure whether to speak aloud or think his response. Thank you. I'm James Harrison. Welcome to Earth." A ripple of what felt like amusement washed over him. "I know who you are, James Harrison. I have been studying the pattern of your thoughts since my ship entered orbit. Your species' dedication to understanding the universe through mathematics is fascinating." She moved closer, her energy field causing the hair on his arms to stand on end. The air crackled with potential, like the moment before lightning strikes. "Your anxiety is unnecessary," she continued. "I am not here to invade your privacy. Asterians understand the importance of mental boundaries." Relief flooded through James, followed immediately by embarrassment as he realized she could probably feel that too. "I'm sorry," he said. "This is all very new to me. Would you like to see inside?" The apartment he'd prepared seemed suddenly inadequate as Nixus floated through the door. He'd installed quantum field generators to help her maintain her energy form more comfortably, but watching her interact with physical space was mesmerizing. She didn't so much touch things as experience them, her energy field extending tendrils of light to explore surfaces and textures. "Your attempts to accommodate my nature are appreciated," she said, pausing by the quantum field generator. "Though your understanding of the technology is incomplete." With a gesture, she adjusted something in the field that made the air feel instantly clearer. "Could you teach me?" James asked, his scientific curiosity temporarily overriding his nervousness. "About how it works?" Another wave of amusement touched his mind. "That is part of why I chose to accept this match, James Harrison. Your desire to understand, to learn, it resonates with my own nature. Among my people, the sharing of knowledge is considered the highest form of intimacy. James felt his face flush at the word intimacy, and Nixus's form flickered in what he was beginning to recognize as laughter. Your species has such interesting reactions to certain concepts, she observed. But do not worry. I am here as much to learn as to teach. As the day progressed, James found himself gradually adjusting to Nixus's presence. She was fascinated by his quantum physics research, offering insights that made him rethink fundamental principles he'd always taken for granted. Her way of seeing the universe was radically different from his human perspective, yet there was a beautiful logic to it. Your current theories about quantum entanglement are primitive, she told him as they reviewed his latest research data. You see it as a connection between particles, but it is more like a reminder that separation is an illusion. Like your telepathy? James asked, watching as she manipulated the holographic display with threads of energy. Similar. All consciousness is connected, James Harrison. Your species is just beginning to understand this. The mathematics you use to describe quantum phenomena are actually closer to a primitive form of telepathy than you realize. As evening approached, James found himself both exhausted and exhilarated. Every conversation with Nixus challenged his understanding of reality, forcing him to think in new ways. But there was also a gentleness to her presence, a respect for his mental space that helped ease his initial fears. You should rest, she said, noticing his fatigue. Your biological form requires it, and tomorrow we have much to discuss. Your second wife arrives in 6 days, and there are things you need to understand about managing multiple interspecies relationships. James had almost forgotten about the others in the fascination of getting to know Nixus. The reminder that this was just the beginning of his new life brought back some of his anxiety, but it was different now. If he could adapt to sharing his home with a being of pure energy who could read his thoughts, perhaps he could handle whatever came next. Will it be difficult? He asked. Having to share space with beings so different from yourself? Nixus's form pulsed gently, a pattern he was learning to associate with thoughtfulness. Difference is the foundation of growth, James Harrison. The universe does not advance through uniformity, but through the harmony of diverse elements. This is true in physics, in biology, and in relationships. As James prepared for bed that night, he could feel Nixus's consciousness settled in another part of the apartment, her energy field a gentle presence at the edge of his awareness. It should have felt intrusive, but somehow it was comforting, like having a living embodiment of the cosmos as a roommate. His last thought before drifting off to sleep was that perhaps the Galactic Federation knew what they were doing after all. If understanding could grow from such strange beginnings, maybe there was hope for genuine unity between all species. The ocean brought Talia to Earth. Her ship, a living vessel that resembled a massive, translucent jellyfish, descended not from the sky but rose from the Pacific Ocean, water cascading from its biological hull as it approached New Singapore's coastal landing platform. James watched from the observation deck, Nixus's ethereal form floating beside him, her energy patterns shifting with curiosity. Her species exists in a state of constant flux, Nixus shared telepathically. Like the oceans they come from, they are ever-changing yet eternal. James nodded, his eyes fixed on the approaching vessel. The past week with Nixus had expanded his understanding of the universe in ways he never thought possible. Now, he was about to add another layer of complexity to his rapidly changing life. The ship's membrane parted like a curtain of liquid glass, and Talia emerged. She moved with fluid grace, her form seeming to shift between solid and liquid states with each step. Her skin was iridescent, catching and refracting light in mesmerizing patterns, and what appeared to be fins or gills along her neck and arms pulsed gently in the air. The air here is so thin, Talia's voice rippled through the air, a sound like waves breaking on distant shores. But I will adapt. Her eyes, deep as ocean trenches, fixed on James with an intensity that made him catch his breath. "Welcome to Earth," James managed, trying to maintain his composure. "I'm James Harrison, and this is Nixis." Talia's form rippled in what might have been amusement. "I know who you both are. We of Oceanus Prime study our mates carefully before making such journeys. Your work on quantum mechanics reminds me of our own scientists' studies of deep ocean pressure fluctuations." As they led Talia to their home, James couldn't help but notice how she analyzed everything around her with a warrior's vigilance. Her fluid movements belied a strength that was evident in every gesture, every calculated glance. The apartment had been modified again to accommodate her needs. A portion had been converted into what the engineers called a variable pressure chamber, a space where Talia could exist in conditions more similar to her oceanic home. The technology was cutting edge, another gift from the Galactic Federation. "Your preparations are thorough," Talia observed as she explored the chamber. Her form became more liquid as she entered it, relief evident in her posture. "Though you should know I can maintain solid form indefinitely. This is a comfort, not a necessity." "James Harrison's thoughts reveal great concern for your comfort," Nixis commented, her energy field interacting curiously with the moisture in the air around Talia. "He has spent many hours studying the optimal conditions for your species." Talia's skin shifted color slightly, displaying patterns that James suspected held meaning he couldn't yet understand. A scientist's thoroughness combined with genuine care. An interesting combination. The dynamic between the three of them developed in unexpected ways over the following days. Where Nixis was ethereal and philosophical, Talia was practical and direct. She approached everything with a warrior scholar's precision, from analyzing James's research to suggesting improvements to their living space. During one evening, as James worked on his quantum equations, Talia watched him with those deep, ancient eyes. "Your calculations remind me of battle strategies," she said. "Each variable like a soldier, each equation a plan of attack against ignorance." An apt metaphor, Nixis agreed, her energy patterns harmonizing with the humidity Talia's presence brought to the air. "Though perhaps we could share how such principles are understood in the deep oceans of your world?" What followed was one of the most extraordinary discussions of James's life. Talia described how her people used water pressure differentials to perform calculations, while Nixis drew parallels to energy wave functions. James found himself scribbling notes frantically, his mind alight with new possibilities. "Your excitement floods the room like a tide," Talia observed, her form shifting closer to watch him work. "It reminds me of young warriors discovering new fighting techniques." "Is everything a battle metaphor with your people?" James asked, genuinely curious. Talia's skin rippled with patterns that somehow conveyed both amusement and seriousness. "Life itself is a battle, James Harrison. Not always with weapons, but with ideas, with limits, with understanding. My people learned this in the deepest trenches of our world, where pressure and darkness taught us to be both strong and adaptive. A philosophy not unlike quantum mechanics," Nixis contributed. "The constant battle between certainty and probability, between what is known and what can only be predicted." As James listened to his two wives discuss the intersection of their different worldviews, he realized something was changing within himself. The fear and uncertainty he'd felt when this all began was transforming into something else, a sense of wonder at the infinite varieties of existence. Later that night, as Talia retreated to her pressure chamber and Nixis's energy field dimmed to a gentle glow, James stood at his window. The city lights below reflected off the distant ocean, and he thought about how his life now contained both the cosmic and the aquatic, the ethereal and the fluid. "Your thoughts are becoming more harmonious," Nixis observed quietly in his mind. "Like waves finding their rhythm." "Is that a water metaphor?" "You're starting to sound like Talia," James replied with a smile. "We all influence each other," came Talia's voice from behind him, her form casting shifting patterns of light across the floor. "Like currents in the great oceans, we meet, we merge, we create new patterns." With Kira's arrival just days away, James wondered what new patterns would emerge in their unusual family. But for now, he was beginning to understand why the Galactic Federation had created these unions. There was something powerful in the merging of different ways of being, something that went beyond political alliances or cultural exchange. The temperature dropped 20 degrees the moment Kira's ship entered New Singapore's atmosphere. Citizens looked up to see ice crystals forming in the previously humid air, creating halos around the evening sun. The vessel itself appeared to be carved from a single piece of living ice, its surface refracting light in impossible ways. James stood with Nixus and Talia on the landing platform, watching their breath form clouds in the suddenly frigid air. Nixus's energy field pulsed more rapidly, adapting to the temperature change, while Talia's fluid form moved more slowly, her natural resistance to cold evident in her more solid state. "She brings winter with her," Talia observed, her voice carrying a hint of tension. "The deep oceans of my world had such cold, in the trenches where light never reached." The ship's crystalline surface fractured into thousands of perfectly geometric shapes, rearranging themselves to form a doorway. Kira emerged like winter personified. Her body appeared to be composed of translucent crystals, her movements accompanied by the subtle sound of ice shifting against ice. Pale blue light emanated from within her form, and the air around her crackled with frozen energy. "The atmospheric compensation is inadequate," were her first words, her voice clear and sharp as breaking ice. "This environment's thermal regulation requires significant improvement." James stepped forward, fighting against his instinct to shiver. "I'm James Harrison. We've prepared special environmental controls in your quarters to maintain your preferred temperature range." Kira's crystalline features shifted in what might have been approval. "Your reputation for precision serves you well, James Harrison. The Cryogenic Council spoke highly of your attention to detail." Her gaze moved to his other wives. "Nixus of the Asterians. Talia of Oceanus Prime. Your presence here is unexpected." "As is yours in my atmosphere," Talia replied, her form rippling with barely contained challenge. "The warmth of these waters is vital to my existence." "Peace," Nixus's thoughts touched them all. "The Federation chose us for our complementary natures, not our similarities. Even opposing forces can find harmony." The tension in the air was palpable as they made their way to the apartment. James had spent the past week working with environmental engineers to create a delicate balance of zones within their living space. Kira's quarters were maintained at sub-zero temperatures, while Talia's remained humid and warm. Nixus's energy field acted as a natural buffer between the extremes. "Your efforts at environmental separation are commendable," Kira noted as she explored her crystalline chamber. "Though the thermal barriers could be optimized further." "Perhaps you could share your insights," James offered, grateful for his thermal protection suit. "I've been studying the principles of heat exchange between different quantum states, but your natural abilities might offer new perspectives." Something shifted in Kira's crystal structure, a pattern that suggested interest. "Your research intersects with my own work on entropy manipulation. The Cryogenic Council has long studied the relationship between thermal energy and information storage." "Information storage?" Talia moved closer, despite her obvious discomfort with the cold. "Like the memory crystals in the deep archives of Oceanus Prime?" "Similar in principle," Kira replied, her tone warming slightly. "Though our methods involve quantum state preservation through absolute zero containment." The conversation that followed was extraordinary. Kira demonstrated how she could freeze specific moments in time by reducing molecular movement to near zero. Nixus contributed her understanding of energy wave functions, while Talia shared how her people preserve knowledge in pressure-sensitive water crystals. James found himself drawing diagrams frantically, trying to capture the implications of their combined knowledge. "This could revolutionize quantum computing," he breathed, his excitement overriding his awareness of the cold. "The ability to maintain quantum states at a macroscopic level. Your enthusiasm generates significant thermal energy," Kira observed, a hint of amusement in her crystalline voice. Though your theories need refinement. Over the next few days, their household fell into an unusual rhythm. The apartment became a study in environmental engineering, with distinct zones that shifted and adapted to maintain everyone's comfort. James found himself moving between these zones like a diplomat, learning to adjust his own behavior and dress to accommodate each wife's needs. The differences between them were stark. Kira approached everything with crystalline logic, her solutions precise and absolute. Talia's fluid nature brought adaptability and practical wisdom, while Nixus's ethereal presence served as a bridge between their disparate approaches to life. One evening, as James worked in his lab, he found all three of his wives engaged in an intense discussion about the nature of state changes. Kira was demonstrating how she could create perfect ice crystals from atmospheric moisture, while Talia showed how she could maintain liquid form even in freezing conditions. Nixus's energy field interacted with both demonstrations, creating beautiful patterns of light and frost in the air. Your species' obsession with maintaining fixed states is fascinating, Nixus observed to Kira. Yet you yourself are capable of subtle changes. Change, when properly controlled, is necessary for growth, Kira responded, her crystal structure shifting slightly. Even ice flows, given enough time and pressure. Like the currents of the deep, Talia added, her form rippling in agreement. Always moving, always changing, yet maintaining their essential nature. James watched them interact, amazed at how three beings so fundamentally different could find common ground. Their conversations often turned into impromptu physics lessons, each sharing how their native physics differed from Earth's understanding of the universe. Yet challenges remained. Environmental controls required constant adjustment as the different atmospheric needs competed with each other. Cultural misunderstandings arose daily, and the mere act of sharing meals became a complex orchestration of different atmospheric conditions and nutritional needs. But with each challenge came new understanding. James found himself growing not just as a scientist, but as a person capable of bridging seemingly impossible divides. His initial fear of this arranged marriage had transformed into fascination with the complex dance of their daily lives. The warning came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. James was in his lab, working with his three wives on a groundbreaking quantum computing project that combined their unique abilities, when every screen in New Singapore suddenly flickered to life. The image showed a massive object emerging from hyperspace, a stellar engineering construct larger than Earth's moon. A void harvester, Nixus's energy form pulsed with alarm, her usually calm thoughts sharp with concern. They consume the quantum potential of entire solar systems. The Cryogenic Council has encountered them before, Kira added, her crystalline structure tensing. They leave nothing but absolute zero in their wake. Even our deepest thermal archives speak of their devastation. Talia's fluid form rippled with recognition. They destroyed 3 oceanic worlds in the Carina sector. Not even the deepest trenches survived their feeding. James studied the readings flooding his quantum displays. The massive construct was already affecting Earth's quantum field, its presence creating distortions in the fabric of spacetime itself. How did they get past the Federation's defense network? They didn't, Nixus shared, her energy patterns forming complex geometric shapes that reflected her analysis. They were already here, waiting in the quantum foam between realities. I can sense their thought patterns, ancient, hungry, and completely alien. The next few hours were chaos. Federation ships arrived in orbit, but their weapons seemed useless against the Void Harvester's quantum-absorbing shields. Earth's own defensive systems, advanced as they were, couldn't even touch the massive construct. But in their apartment-turned-laboratory, something extraordinary was happening. James watched as his 3 wives worked together in ways that defied conventional physics. Kira's absolute zero field contained Nixus's pure energy form, while Talia's fluid state acted as a quantum conductor between them. Your quantum entanglement theories, Talia said to James, her form shifting with excitement. combined with Kira's entropy manipulation. And my ability to exist in multiple quantum states, Nixis added, her energy pulsing in harmony with Kira's ice crystals. We could create a quantum resonance cascade, James finished, his mind racing with calculations. Force them out of our reality by collapsing their quantum field. The theory was sound, but the execution would require something unprecedented, a perfect synthesis of all their abilities. Kira would need to create a zero-point energy field large enough to encompass the harvester. Talia's fluid form would have to conduct quantum information at scales never before attempted. Nixis would need to project her consciousness into multiple quantum states simultaneously. And James's understanding of quantum mechanics would have to tie it all together. It could kill us all, Kira stated, her crystal form refracting light in complex patterns. The energy requirements alone. Life is a battle worth fighting, Talia responded, her form becoming more solid with determination. Even against impossible odds. The separation between life and death is another illusion, Nixis added, her energy field expanding to encompass them all. What matters is our choice to act as one. James looked at his three wives, these extraordinary beings who had transformed his life from one of solitary research into something far more meaningful. Then let's give them something they've never seen before, a unified theory of everything. They worked as one. Kira generated a quantum frost field that spread across the city, creating a lattice of absolute 0 points in space. Talia's fluid form expanded through this lattice, creating quantum conductive pathways that defied conventional physics. Nixis projected her consciousness through these pathways, existing in thousands of quantum states simultaneously. And James, drawing on everything he'd learned from them, wrote the equations that would bring it all together. His quantum displays filled with mathematics that merged the physical laws of three alien civilizations with Earth's understanding of the universe. The Void Harvester never stood a chance. The combined quantum effect hit it like a tsunami of reality itself. Where Kira's absolute zero field touched it, its entropy-stealing abilities failed. Talia's quantum conductivity forced it to exist in a single state, while Nixis's multi-state consciousness overwhelmed its simple hunger for energy. The massive construct twisted in ways that hurt the eyes to watch, its form folding in on itself as it was forced out of their reality. In its final moments, it tried to feed on the energy being used against it, but that energy was the combined life force of four beings who had learned to exist as one despite their differences. When it was over, when the skies above New Singapore were clear again, James looked at his wives with new understanding. Kira's crystalline form had taken on aspects of Talia's fluidity. Talia's liquid state shimmered with Nixis's energy patterns. And Nixis's pure energy had gained new structure from Kira's influence. They had changed each other, grown together in ways the Federation might have hoped for but could never have predicted. The universe is more beautiful for its diversity, Nixis shared, her thoughts touching them all with newfound warmth. And stronger for its unity, Talia added, her form rippling with joy. A perfect equation, Kira concluded, her crystal structure catching and refracting their combined light. James smiled, understanding at last the true purpose of the Interstellar Marriage Act. It wasn't just about political alliances or cultural exchange. It was about creating something entirely new, proof that the fundamental forces of the universe, like love itself, worked best when they worked together. That evening, as they celebrated with the city, James watched his three wives interact with their unique environmental needs all but forgotten in their shared victory. The Federation had been right, the future of both humanity and alien civilizations lay not in remaining separate, but in finding ways to make their differences work in harmony. Their apartment was still a study in environmental engineering, with its careful balance of temperature zones and quantum fields. But now it was something more, a laboratory for the future, where four beings from across the galaxy had learned that love, like physics, transcended the boundaries between worlds.